welcome to another edition of the Sports Guys 2025 edition. Happy New Year to everyone. Hope you had a great time with your family. You had a great New Year. You had some time off from work. Had a fabulous Christmas. We haven't done a podcast in going on 2 weeks now, so we're really excited to be back. How you doing, Robbie?
I'm doing really well. Very excited to be back. Missed the podcast episodes. It's fun to talk about what we've seen on all this sports. It was a sports overload and cookie and cake overload as well. 3 pounds heavier, so that's due to all the mischief I got into in the cookie jar. But had a great Christmas. Boys had a phenomenal time. I got to spend a lot of time with them. Got to see you. I got to see Dad. So it was just an awesome couple weeks. And I was itching to do a podcast, but I definitely enjoyed all the time that I had for all you guys. So I wouldn't change a thing. It was fun. It was nice.
I had a great time too. Came up to see you guys. Spent Christmas Day with you. The day before, I got to see my kids and my grandkids. That was fantastic. And then I got to spend some really quality time with them. And then my girlfriend and I actually got to go down to Amelia Island, which is one of my favorite places on earth. Spent 4 days down there, had a great time. Went to the New Year's party. We had a blast. Hung out at the pool, 70 degrees, sunny. Doesn't get any better than that. And then I come back to Charlotte and it's 32 degrees. So
that's why people go to Florida in the winter.
That's right. I did not want to come back. But anyway, we are back and we are super pumped, guys, to kick off 2025 with you guys. I cannot thank you enough for how much this channel has grown in 2024, heading into 2025. We have so many cool things coming your way, and we're really excited to kick it off. Today, we're going to be talking about college football games that we've been seeing the last week or so. As Rob said, we've been chomping at the bit to bring you guys what we've been seeing, which has been pretty cool to watch. The college football playoff and then a whole slew of other bowl games that have been pretty good too. So Robbie, what are your big takeaways from kind of the past 10 days of just total smorgasbord of sports?
Just so much sports, but the beautiful part is you actually have time to enjoy them. And there's no such thing as boredom because there's so much good football on that you can always entertain yourself for a few hours. And then all the gifts you get for Christmas and games. We've been playing family games, and so much good sports. It's really hard to summarize it all, but in the end, obviously, the biggest takeaway was the playoffs. The college playoffs was amazing. Several bowl games really piqued my interest, but it was exciting to see some of these seniors get that bowl game and get to say goodbye. You could see there was an emotional goodbyes in a number of times. To watch the anticipation didn't always live up to the hype with the games, but it was still cool to see it all happen because you're watching history being made, and this is a first. I know they're going to learn a lot out of this first one in terms of how to set up the tournament, rules. You know, they're arguing about how SEC doesn't allow full team substitutions, whereas other leagues do. It was just a really cool couple of weeks of so much football and lots of other sports, basketball mixed in there. But the college playoff has been pretty cool. It's been unique. Obviously, everyone has opinions on it. There's a lot of things that can be tweaked and improved. But for the most part, it's a whole lot better than just the same 3 schools competing and beat up on the 4th school that sneaks in there every year. So at least other teams had an opportunity to get in there and try and win. Very few did much, but there was a little bit of noise made. But when it all comes down, you end up kind of where you thought you were, where you have 4 blue bloods going at it. So at the end, there's not too much in the way of surprises either, so.
In some ways, but one of my takeaways is that the college football playoff from the very beginning of the season has just been absolutely fantastic for college football, and it's proving out again. There's so much viewership, so much interest, The games are great. Some of them are a little bit of blowouts, but even in the blowout situations in the first half, a lot of times it's the second half, the other team comes back a little bit, makes it a challenge.
Yeah, almost in
Now,
every case, the team came back and made it a game, kind of.
yeah,
So
my takeaway on the rest of the bowls is some of them have been really good. Actually, the non-college football playoff bowls have been decent. Some of
yeah,
them have been just complete wipeouts and not even worth watching, and the football's been unwatchable in some cases. I've noticed the last 20 years or so, the bowls have been getting less and less relevant to the point where you remember the last couple of years, we had teams that sat out almost all their starters in bowl games, which is
yeah.
not exactly what people want to see when they pay money to go to the game, or when they watch it on TV. They don't want to see a bunch of second stringers playing second stringers. What do you think of this trend, though, about some guys are starting to play like the first half and then not play the second half, even when their team's in a really competitive bowl game situation?
I'm fine with it. I think that the bowls are showcases for recruiting. They are a gift to your seniors. They're a gift to the alumni. They don't really matter that much, and both teams get paid no matter what. So it's not like in a major boxing match where, one guy might make 40 million and then the other guy makes 10. Everyone's making money, so I'm okay with it. I think
Isn't there something fundamentally that bothers you that Cam Ward, in a really
no,
tight game, ends up
no, not
losing
at all.
42-41 to Iowa State when, I don't know, if it were me, I'm such a competitor, there's no way you're keeping me out of the second half. It's just not
No,
happening.
I found that to be a really strange thing where people were criticizing him because he played a half and they were saying he quit on his team. The whole goal, he was supposed to play one quarter and he played a half. Um, Nobody criticized Christian McCaffrey for not playing in the bowl game. There have been so many other stars, Nick Bosa. There's so many stars that are true number one picks that didn't want to get hurt. They saw Willis McGahee blow his leg out in their meaningless bowl game, and they're looking out for their future. They're making a business decision. I get
Well, like,
that.
Coach Prime's three big stars, they played in a half as well and didn't play in the second
Yeah,
half, and they got
I'm
blown
fine
out.
with it.
Mm.
Give us something. I think that's pretty cool that they'll play a half. I had no problem with it. The problem I had with the whole thing was the way they were characterizing it as quitting on his team at halftime.
No, I
I
agree
thought
with
that
that.
was
That's
that
not
was
true.
so unfair. Like, it was just so unfair. That's
So
not what happened.
should we just admit that these are exhibitions? That's what they are.
They're
They're
exhibitions.
exhibition games.
The
They're
bowl
they're
games are,
they're
not the
post game
playoff. The playoff
exhibitions.
is legitimate.
But the problem with the post game exhibitions is that they're still handing out trophies for these games, right? So like the Gator
Ah,
Bowl gives out a trophy. You're giving a trophy out for an exhibition. I don't know. It just seems competitively out of whack a little bit.
I if you're in a bowl game, you're not in the main one. It's like the NIT. You're not that upset if you don't win it all. You're just kind of like, wasn't our best season. And you
Hmm.
move on. And you get the extra 3 weeks of practice, which is great for recruiting and great for your freshmen and your red shirt freshmen getting that extra
You
time.
do let the young guys play too, which is a big help.
You let the young guys
Give
play.
them some playing
You
time.
let the backup to Cam Ward play. You get the backup to a lot of these quarterbacks play. You have the guy from Duke transferring out, so that Duke plays their backup, who's going to be the backup for the guy coming in this year. So there's opportunities. It's fine.
I
I'm fine.
I totally agree with you about all your points. I don't know. There's something about me being such a competitor like I am. I just know me. I would want to go back in the second half. I just would. And
I
when I'm in
mean,
a
even
tight
the
game,
NFL is going through something similar right now. Should we play Saquon Barkley? Should we play Patrick Mahomes? You know, and I heard Bill Belichick talk about it. He said, if they're not hurt, he said, I had a team full of guys that you couldn't keep out if you tried. They'd be furious if you pulled them out. So unless they were injured, and then they realized that it's best for the team if I get healed up. But he said, I never had to worry about that with Teddy Bruschi and Tom Brady and Lawyer Malloy and all these guys. They wanted to go hit.
but it would also be malpractice if you let Mahomes play when they've already locked up the number one seed. That doesn't make any
Right.
sense for him to play.
So as a
So
coach, you're making a tough call that's going to make your star player
it doesn't
upset.
make sense for Barkley to play either. So
It's really the same thing. It's the same thing. It's what's on the line versus what you have to gain. Nobody really cares about winning the Alamo Outback whatever bowl. You want to win if you go, but you don't care that much if you lose.
Yeah.
You don't want to get blown out. That's embarrassing. But
I kind of like your idea you had last podcast about college football, where you said let's create an NIT. There
yeah,
may be a little bit more competition if you create an NIT and you have
yeah,
some of these medium-sized bowls join it. The Gator Bowl
yeah,
and others, the Orange Bowl.
yeah,
You might get a little bit more competition instead of just this exhibition field that you have now for all these bowls.
yeah. Everyone wants to win a trophy and go out, winning something. And I think setting up a second tournament would be fun. Um, I don't know how you do it, but it probably would involve a couple games. You'd have to have different brackets, maybe north, south, east, and west, and everyone
I mean, if you
wins.
made it number 13 to number, 24, that's going to be a pretty good bracket. Those are good teams.
Maybe. Or you could just break it down to where everyone plays 2 games and that's it. And whoever wins by the most points or something. I don't know.
Hmm.
Maybe you have
Well,
regions. There's a west region, an east region, a north region, a south region. And you have a champion for each one.
So my take is, the college football playoff is fantastic. The bowl games have gotten even more diminished with it because these teams that don't make the college football playoff, especially with some of the big stars, these guys have been getting NIL money for a couple of years. A lot of them are going to the NFL draft, and the last thing they want to do is break a leg or hurt their shoulder or something. So you're going to end up getting less and less participation from the stars. But there is some upside, like we talked about, with the young guys playing, and the fact that you get a whole another 3 weeks or 4 weeks of practice with these guys. There's some upside. So we'll have to see how it develops.
Yep. Yeah, it's cool because we're right at the beginning of it and they can kind of go in any direction they want. And we're at a point where there's a lot of possibilities, and everyone's got opinions and
In the end, sports is entertainment, and all those bowls that are still in place, the Cheetos Bowl or whatever it is, in the end, I'd still rather watch that, even if it doesn't have full team's participation, than some trashy movie on A&E or something.
oh, listen, the Cheetos and the Pop-Tarts bowl were great,
Yeah, yeah. So
and the branding for the bowls themselves and the mascots and
I just wish we could get back to a place where all those bowls mattered to those teams, but I'm not sure we can get there. So, well, let's go take a look at what we got for this week.
let's do it.
So this week we got the college football playoff breakdowns episode. This is our bowl game reviews as well. Episode 44. You see some great photos there. This is from the 4 games that we were talking about that were so epic that came in the quarterfinals. You have Ohio State and their number 0 on defense, who just absolutely mopped up when it came to this game. He was so dominant. It was unbelievable. He actually had been projected as a 3rd-round pick, but they said that he did maybe the most good for himself in that game of anybody on either side of the field. Then you have Warren from Penn State there making his 2nd touchdown catch. He had a huge impact. Then you have Notre Dame holding up their big trophy in their big win last night. What a fantastic performance by them, especially their defense was really dominant.
Yeah.
And then Texas holds off a pesky Arizona State, a team that they had built a big lead against, and then gave it up and went into overtime and then double overtime and found a way to get it done. So those are your final 4. What are your thoughts about these epic teams clashing now in the semifinals?
Well, I think it's 4 of the 6 or 8 blue bloods that are penciled in automatically every year. But it's cool to see Penn State up there. You don't see them frequently up. You see them fighting to get in there, but they never do. They've got maybe one natty in the last. I don't know. I'm happy for them. I think that's great. Notre Dame sometimes sneaks up there and gets walloped, so they look pretty nice and dominant. Texas hasn't had that many national championships either, but they're always relevant. They always put a lot of pros in, and Ohio State's always there. So this is not a super big, shocking group of 4, but it's cool to see a little bit different. Alabama's out, never got in the first place. Georgia's out.
What are your thoughts, though, about
And then
all 4?
Oregon's out. So there was some upsets.
What are your thoughts about all four of these guys? None of them had a bye. None of them were top ranked. All of them had to earn their way there and win multiple games to get to the semis. You had this weird situation where you had four bye teams that all lost and it went 0-4. So
The most impressive victory by far was Ohio State.
yeah.
Just manhandling the best team in the country. But all these victories were very impressive, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Penn State, super tough, especially defensively.
Mm-hmm.
Notre Dame, a lot like Penn State, a little weaker on offense, tremendous defense, kind of rode the defense all the way through and got in there. And
Mm-hmm.
Texas, their defense is wildly underrated. It's incredible. And their offense has spurts and moments of brilliance and then lots of mediocrity. So,
Yet Texas gave up a lot of yards and a lot of points. So I don't
yeah.
know.
Yeah, that was a strange game. I think if Texas played them again, they would blow them out.
Mm-hmm.
Talent-wise, they're superior, but there
Mm-hmm.
was something gutsy going on that was just really difficult to pinpoint. And Arizona State just played hard and
Mm-hmm.
with
And
guts.
as I've been saying all year, Ewers is just subpar compared to his team. His team is fantastic.
Yeah,
He's subpar. He made some really bad throws, a couple of really
yeah.
bad picks, which gave them a chance to get back in the game. So,
Texas and Georgia kind of reminded me of each other this year. Outstanding defenses and offense that had brilliant moments, but some real mediocre quarterback play.
mm-hmm. That's right. That's the way I looked at it. Like, would you rather have Ewers or Aller from Penn State right now?
It'd be close.
I say
I've heard
Aller.
a lot about Ewers as a leader. He's a good leader, so I'm kind of tempted to go towards Aller. Well, I think I'd take Ewers, but only by a little bit.
I'm not taking Ewers. I'm taking Aller. Aller has really impressed me the last couple of weeks. So
He's doing a decent job on a mediocre offense.
mm-hmm.
Neither of them would be my top choices at quarterback, though.
Yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely. I think that overall, if you looked at the top 12 teams in this bracket that we're about to look at, the quarterback play for a lot of them has been subpar compared to what you expect.
I will
And
say a few weeks ago, Aller convinced me that he should go in the NFL. He should be in the NFL.
mm-hmm.
Um,
He's got 1 year left and he's going to stay. And apparently, they're looking at him as maybe the top guy coming back next year.
yeah.
So,
I think that he showed me a lot over the second half of the season, and I
mm-hmm.
think he really got better. He's not going to light you up. He's not a superstar, but he'd be a nice little project in the NFL. A good
And
little
then
backup.
Will Howard, I mean, he hadn't played that well the entire year. He had really been struggling, very similar to Ewers, very
Yeah.
similar to some of the other bad quarterback play, had been subpar compared to Ohio State. And he really came up huge in that game against Oregon. I mean,
He had
just,
a phenomenal game.
I think he ever played that well before. So, I don't know. It was really interesting to watch.
Mm.
So, looking at the bracket, you can see here how it started and how it's now down to 4. You have Ohio State that beat Oregon in an epic game. You have Texas that took care of Arizona State in double OT. Notre Dame last night with a really smothering defense took out Georgia, who had their backup quarterback playing and just looked like they couldn't get anything going offensively. And then Penn State really kind of dismantled Boise and completely shut down the best back in the country in Genty.
Yep.
He just couldn't do anything. And so, in terms of the way they're playing right now, these are the best 4 in terms of how they're playing, especially on defense. Any overall thoughts about this 4 bracket?
I think it was too bad to see Oregon have to play Ohio State. I felt like that was the two best teams in the country. And even though I predicted Oregon would win, I did say that Ohio State has the best roster. And I also said that I felt like the national champion is coming out of that game. So
Mm-hmm.
I switch Oregon and Ohio State at this point because
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State we've only seen occasionally that level of synergy and chemistry. And you knew that the level of talent on that team is completely off the chart. And if they start playing well together, there's nobody going to touch them.
Yep. No, I said the same thing. The national champ would come out of that bracket. Of course, I chose Oregon as well. Luke chose Ohio State,
I
which
did
was
not. I did not think Ohio State was capable of playing that well together, but I'm not surprised by the flashes of brilliance we saw from the individual players. But to watch their defense, special teams, and offense have complementary football with the sizzling plays from their stars, there's nobody going to beat them if they play like that. If they play like that, they will beat any team by 20 in the country.
and
It
they'll
doesn't
beat the
matter who you
bottom,
line up against.
and they'll beat the bottom 2 or 3 NFL teams.
Possibly.
So, I never saw Will Howard being able to outduel Dylan Gabriel. That's why I went with Oregon. It was just I just felt that he was the better quarterback.
Dylan
And
Gabriel was just getting
reality
hit
is,
every play.
reality is Will Howard played better than Dylan Gabriel in this game. I don't know if he would
Well,
if he played 10 times, but
I
he
don't
just
know
had
that he
weapons all
played
over the
better. I
field.
mean, the results were better. I think what Gabriel had to deal with that Ohio State defensive line and secondary was pretty unbelievable. I mean, I felt sorry for Gabriel at a certain point.
Mm-hmm. No, it was
He's throwing the
incredible.
ball and they're whacking his arm and just
So that was an epic Rose Bowl. That's the Rose Bowl everybody wanted, but like you said, it really was very unfair that
it was
Oregon
one-sided. Yeah.
had the hardest draw, and they were the number 1 seed. It just seemed very unfair.
Yeah. Seems crazy.
And then, so that was a great Rose Bowl. Then down in the Peach Bowl, of course, Texas gets it done in Atlanta. I was really happy to see some of these epic bowls that have been in place for so many years as part of our history and our traditions
Yeah.
all be part of this bracket. That was pretty cool. Then, of course, Notre Dame takes care of business in the Sugar Bowl against Georgia. Georgia was completely smothered all night. And then in the Fiesta Bowl, Penn State probably looked the best they've looked the entire season. And Boise looked completely overmatched. So the next 2 bowls coming up this week, you have a Thursday night game and a Friday night game. And what was interesting, there's a little controversy because Notre Dame has to play in the Thursday night game against Penn State, and Notre Dame had the quickest turnaround. Of course, they had to play a day late because of the terrorist attack. And so there was some feeling that they should have switched the games and had one on Thursday, one on Friday, and let Notre Dame be the second game so they could have more recovery time.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, they're going to have a short week to come back on Thursday night against Penn State. So you think there's anything to that they're not getting the extra day of rest?
I mean, it's hard to say. I don't think one extra day is going to do a lot with injuries. They've played a lot of football by this point, and they didn't get buys. So,
I mean, Penn State played the night before on 31st, so they're going to get 2 extra days of rest
yeah.
versus Notre Dame. That can mean a lot in football.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a factor.
There was some thought that they should switch the games. The problem is then you're penalizing Ohio State and Texas, which they didn't do anything, to deserve that. So
Right.
I don't know.
And their
So
whole
that
system is set up now to have those days. So
that Thursday game is going to be the Orange Bowl in Miami, and then the Friday night game is going to be the Cotton Bowl in Dallas, Texas. So those are the great games we got to look forward to this week. So what about this quote here? I think this proves we need to go back to the 4-man playoff system. Is this just Kirby smarting off after the game, being emotional? Is this kind of how these big blood guys really think that, it waters it down? You should only have a 4-man so that you get the truly best teams at the top.
I mean, who's he to say that they didn't get the best teams?
Yeah.
I disagree with him. I mean, I think we should have tried the 8-team playoff before we tried the 12-team. I think we should have jumped from 4 to 8 and seen where the problems are with the 8-team tournament. But since we went from 4-team playoff to 12, let's just tweak it and make it the best we can make it. I think this is great.
I do too. I completely disagree with him. I think that this has made it so much more exciting for all college football fans, all programs across the country. I know he's used to being in the Final Four, and he's not this time, but I think this was just an emotional comment made by a guy who is smarting from a loss he just took.
Yeah,
That's
fair
the
enough.
way I look at it. Yeah. So this whole idea about it watering down is the complete opposite message we're trying to send in college football, which is let's spread it out to more programs. Let's have more, parity, some more fan
It
bases
is
can
nice.
be.
I mean, Notre Dame doesn't get up there every year. Texas is always good, but when's the last time they were in the national title? Vince Young, what was that, 15 years ago? 20
More
years
than
ago?
that. More than that, yeah.
20 years ago? And when's the last time Penn State was in it? 30
Yeah,
years
Penn
ago?
State, Boise State, Arizona State, all these
Yeah,
teams,
yeah,
Indiana. I don't know what he's complaining about. He got a bye, you know.
yeah,
Like to me, the bye teams were all 0-4, but I mean that's not anybody's fault other than themselves.
yeah.
Do you think there's something to that? I mean, the fact that these 0-4 bye teams had a
No.
week to rest and that they were rusty and came out not firing the first half like the other teams. What do you think? What's the theory here?
No, I think that the
Like Oregon looked really flat, Georgia looked really flat.
I think the teams other than Oregon who ran into Ohio State at their best, um, the other three were not the best teams. So
Mhm.
Georgia
Yeah.
is in the top 5, I would say, but Oregon ran into the best version of Ohio State, which is the best team in the country when they're like that,
Mhm.
and they didn't
Yeah.
have a chance. I mean, I don't think
I
anyone
think
has a chance if Ohio State plays like that.
I think there's something to it. I personally believe we see it in the NFL all the time where, KC will get a bye and then the next team they play in round two, they look really flat in the first half and can't do anything and have to figure out a way to come back.
There's been a
We
lot of
see it we see it
discussion.
a lot. We see it a lot.
It's called rest versus rust, and
Mhm.
I know there's a lot to that, but I don't think that's what happened in this case. I don't think that's what we saw happen. What we saw happen was the grinding teams that really wanted it maintain the momentum from playing the week before, yes, but they summoned up their A game. I don't think Notre Dame can play better than that. I don't think Ohio State can play better than that. I think Texas is a superior team to Arizona State, but Arizona State gave them everything they could handle. And I don't think
Mhm.
Penn State can play better than that. So
Mhm.
those are the teams going on are the ones who got their A game up and made it happen. And the
I don't
teams
know.
that had made mistakes and did a lot of had a lot of problems are the ones that are going home.
I have to tell you, I'm not sure I want the extra week of rest. I know that some coaches would disagree and some would agree. It'd probably be a split ticket if you did a poll, but I want my guys playing. I want my guys fired up, and I want them sharp. Well, guys, drop us a comment down below. We'd really love to hear from you. Do you think there's an advantage to having a bye in this type of playoff system, or is it better to just play every week and stay really sharp and not have that rust that comes in? Love to hear you guys what you guys' comments are. Let's talk about the first game that came on the 31st. Penn State wins 31-14 against Boise State. This was the Fiesta Bowl. Was not really even that competitive. It could have been even more of a blowout, but Penn State started just running the ball in the second half to run the clock out. The game kind of dragged on a bit. Boise State, they just didn't have the firepower to make this really a competitive game. Abdul Carter was the best player on the field until he got injured and had to sit out the second half, but it was pretty clear in the first quarter he was just in the backfield every play. It was unbelievable. You can see some of the passing numbers here. Aller had a nice game, but not huge numbers. 171 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. Maddox Matson had 304 yards passing, which was a pretty good day for him with a touchdown, but he had 3 interceptions, real
Yeah,
costly
very costly.
situations. What are your thoughts about the quarterback play in this game?
I like both these quarterbacks. I think they're good young quarterbacks who have a lot of upside. They're not top tier quarterbacks, but they could make the NFL and could probably stay there a while. I think both of them tend to be good leaders and helped elevate their team throughout most of the year. So that's kind of where I am on the quarterback play. Obviously, Maddox Madsen had a really nice season. He was able to take a lot of pressure off Genty throughout most of the year. He could not here. They stacked the box to stop Genty, and Madsen was unable to beat the excellent secondary.
But think
of
about what it's like
Penn State.
if you play the season they did, and all of a sudden at the very end of the season, you have to play either a Big Ten or an SEC defense. Like it's just a
Yeah,
completely different level
it's a different animal.
with Abdul Carter in your backfield every play.
Yeah,
It's
I know.
just they just weren't ready for it.
No, there's no way to get ready for it.
Do you look at these two guys as kind of game managers plus? And that's the way I
Yeah,
look at them.
I think they're leaders. I think they do a nice job. I think they're limited in their arm strength and their ability to get the ball down the field. But I think Madsen throws a nice ball, and I think he's a good quarterback. He's a good college quarterback, is what he is, and a backup in the NFL. But that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Backups in the NFL make $2 million a year or whatever, carrying a clipboard and being healthy. So,
It's a pretty good job.
and they have free chicken wings anytime they go out in the city where they're playing. So,
Yeah.
you know,
So looking at the rushing numbers, Katron Allen with 134 yards rushing, and Nicholas Singleton, who had that kind of game closer at the very end, he ripped off. He had 87. So, I mean, Penn State had a lot of success on the ground. Ashton Genty tried really hard. He had a lot of carries with 30 carries, but he could only get 104 yards, which was really low for him. His long was 26, but for the most part, most of the game, he was really bottled up and couldn't do very much.
he was getting hit so hard.
You could see they were doing 9 men in the box, and you assumed that's what they were going to do, was to force Madsen to beat them. So, what are your thoughts
And
about
that's what they try to do on some level. But if you look at a little deeper into the stats, look at the rushing yardage. Okay. Penn State had 41 rushes and Boise State had 40. So it was very similar in the terms of the number of times they ran the ball. Penn State had 216 yards on 41 yards rushing, and Boise had 108. So 216 versus 108 on almost the same number of carries. Penn State
Yeah.
was more effective running the ball, even though they have Genty.
Well, look
The
at their
defense
averages. They were almost
superior.
8 yards per carry.
Yeah, that's
Look at
right.
their averages.
That's
So,
right. So Genty finished up 27 yards short of Barry Sanders' all-time college record, which was sad, but they put him in an elite category. He had an amazing season, but he just couldn't face up to what Penn State brought. They brought incredible pressure on the running back. And Madsen had to throw it more than they probably wanted him to. 35 times is a lot to throw the ball.
on the receiving side, of course, Warren is that stud tight end we talk about all the time. Had 6 balls.
He
2
won the
touchdowns.
John Mackey Award, and he's the best tight end I've seen in a long time, except for what's his name last year?
Yeah, Brock Bowers. Yeah,
Brock
he's
Bowers.
fantastic.
He reminds me of Brock Bowers. In fact, this year we saw Tyler Warren running the ball in the backfield, catching every kind of little screen, and
He
he's a
basically is a
very
Brock Bowers.
versatile weapon.
That's what he is. He
He's
is
a Brock
Brock
Bowers.
Bowers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a
Yep.
versatile weapon, and NFL teams should be lining up to try and get him.
Now, I will say, if you look at the receiving numbers for Boise, they actually had a couple of really nice receivers. They had this guy
Yeah.
Louder, they had Camper.
Yep.
So a couple of these guys had a really nice game because they were being forced to pass because Genty was bottled up. So,
and Maddox Madsen was throwing picks, so that gives extra possessions to Penn State, and they were turning around, running the ball, and putting on, running the score up.
So offensive line for Broncos couldn't hold up. Defensive line for Penn State was fantastic. What else can you boil this game down to? I mean, really, in the trenches, Penn State was clearly
four turnovers for Penn State's defense that they caused, and 3 sacks and lots of pressure. They did a lot of forced run blitzes. So Genti would get the ball, and he had 8 guys swarming him.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Madsen would fake handoff, they just kept pressuring. They would see that he didn't have the ball, and they would keep coming, and they would spy Genti out of the backfield, and they would just pressure. So they just brought so much pressure on both the running back and quarterback that the offense couldn't function properly.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Well, again, this was a great win by Penn State. Like you said, you're not sure they could play any better. I agree with that. Boise State's a really good team, but just couldn't hang with the pressure of a Big Ten team that came very close to winning the Big Ten championship. So,
to be
Penn
fair,
State,
Madsen had a pretty nice game. He had
did.
an 86.1 QBR.
And by the way, those 3 picks that you mentioned for Madsen, all 3 of those should have ended up in points for Boise State. It often came very deep down into Penn State territory.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just killers when you have all those points that come off the board because you're throwing picks at the wrong time. So next game was Texas, Arizona State, the most competitive game of the entire second round. This was an incredibly interesting game. It was a tale of 2 halves. Texas was dominating the first half. Their defense essentially wouldn't let Arizona State do anything. Their offense was clicking. Ewers had some nice throws in the first half. And then the second half was just the complete opposite. Ewers started throwing picks and started making bad throws and throwing it out of bounds and started giving Arizona State a chance to kind of turn themselves around. Levitt had a pretty nice second half. Scadaboo, of course, absolutely dominant second half and almost single-handedly brought them back. So what are your thoughts first about the passing games for both these teams?
It was kind of a tale of 2 halves. Texas dominated the first half pretty significantly. I will say that I've been talking about Scadaboo most of the year, and a lot of people are just being introduced to him now. I've been amazed by him the whole time. I felt like he should have been one of the top contenders for Heisman because of his skill set is unique. There's really no one like him currently in college. And he's a real tough-nosed leader who loves contact and can really make a difference on the field. He can really ignite his team with an emotional lift, and that's hard in football. So I felt like Arizona State scratched and clawed their way to having a shot here. Their desire was admirable. I think they were outclassed skill-wise, but they wanted it more than Texas. They were fighting. They were tough. They were just open field tackles were great. Arizona State has either number 1 or number 2 run defense in the Big 12. So they're certainly very capable defense. That should not have been a surprise to anybody.
Concerning thing for me for Texas is that they haven't run the ball very well all year, and they did again this time. They rely so heavily on Ewers. Everything comes through the passing game for Texas. So,
incredibly concerning.
Again, I don't know how far they go after this, but in terms of this game, they really should have won this even more comfortably than they did. And it was largely because Scadaboo and Levitt both had really good games and really kind of salvaged something in the second half.
Yeah.
It didn't look like they were going to get, but they did. Just the pure guts and effort, I guess you could say. I will say this kid for Texas on the wide receiver core, Golden really impressed me.
Oh, yeah.
He was fantastic.
He was a star.
Yeah,
and so was Gunnar Helm.
Really
Gunnar Helm was a great target.
He's really good. So, what else can you say about Scadaboo? I mean, he was so dynamic in this game. Threw for a touchdown. He had 8 catches for 99 yards on the receiving side, and he's a running back.
He was a machine.
30 for 143 with 2 touchdowns on the rushing side of the ledger.
They couldn't stop him.
I don't think there's anything else he could have done in this game to try to win this game.
He threw for a long touchdown, 42-yard touchdown throw, and he just kind of did everything possible to try and win. And people really admired that. You could see that after game reaction was pretty impressive with people being introduced to him for the first time. But before the game, they did a really interesting pregame with his family and his mom. And his mom talked about they used to call him Harry Houdini. When he was little, he'd get out of his cribs and he'd get out of his car seats. And she said if we ever put him somewhere he didn't want to be, he would get out of there. He would do something else that he wanted to do, even from a little age when he was a toddler. So they said when he was a little bit older than a toddler, he would put on his brother's pads because his dad was a football coach, and he'd go run into telephone poles. So he's been he loves contact. He loves physicality, and he loves the game of football. And it came through in his performance where he did everything you can possibly do to win.
This kid, I mean, every NFL scout should want this guy on their team. He's just a pure football player.
Right.
Loves the game, plays like a linebacker. I don't know if
would love to be on special teams, would love to do anything that can help his team.
That's right. That's right.
If he could kick, he probably would,
I just love the kid. He's just fantastic. So Texas misses 2 field goals in the second half, or this wouldn't have even gotten to overtime.
Yep.
And did a bunch of other blunders that were just kind of head-scratching for a team that is in the semifinals now. Giving up that
and the Scattaboo throw for 42 yards was a terrible throw. Underthrown dramatically, and Texas lost it in the lights or something, and the guy caught it. He came way underneath because it was underthrown, caught it, and scampered into the end zone. So they were pretty fortunate to have that play go that way instead of a safety coming up and picking it off.
Feel like Texas has been kind of playing this way all year. Like their offense never seems to get – they don't quite play up to potential. Their defense gives up all these points to Arizona State, which is not exactly a premier program. I don't know.
Yeah, it wasn't Texas very impressive.
So
Texas said it, Sarkisian said, we didn't play very well, but that was a gutsy performance. And that's exactly right. Texas knows they didn't play as well as they need to win the national championship, but they went toe-to-toe with a bare-knuckle brawler, and they came out on top. So, and whatever you're going to say about Ewers, he threw a strike on 4th down for a touchdown to goal.
That was an incredible play. I mean, if that play gets tipped away or knocked away, the game's over. Arizona State wins.
It was 4th and 12 or something like that. It was 4th and a lot of yards.
That was a great throw.
It wasn't a 4th and 1 tush push. It was a gutsy hang in there, throw down the barrel and score the touchdown.
That was so strange about Ewers is he has moments like that where he really
sure does.
And he's great.
That's why he's the starter, is he has moments like that.
And then he has throws that you just can't explain. Like, who's it to? It's into triple coverage. I don't know. I'm hoping that at the next level they'll be able to coach it out of him, because he'll just absolutely kill a team if he throws picks like that.
I think he needs more coaching, more time, but this was the most exciting game in the series, I think.
Yeah.
Not just because it was close. The fact that it was close was only part of why it was so good. It was exciting game because you knew Texas was the better team, but Arizona State wouldn't go down. They just kept fighting and then took it to overtime. I saw an interesting one of those rabbit holes on the internet. They're filing a grievance that the game should advance. And by the way, the committee gets to advance the teams. So the committee could advance Arizona State if it wanted. Because it's not up to the score.
What's the grievance?
The grievance is that when Arizona State kicked the ball and Texas blocked it, it bounced on the ground and went up and through the uprights, and that's technically a good field goal. So if you looked at the timing of that, they're saying that Texas would not have had time to score, and so it should have never gone to overtime. That's their grievance. It's kind of legitimate, to be honest. I don't feel that way, but I understand what they're saying.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, this was a fantastic game. We watched this from beginning to end. It was so exciting.
Yep.
kind of on the edge of your seat, didn't know what was going to happen, went into the second overtime where you have to go for two, and Texas gets it done. So we'll see.
I kind of going into the game, I was excited because I wanted to see Scadaboo against like a major defense. And I have been on not only Scadaboo all year, but Texas's defense all year I've been talking about. And I said, this is going to be a heck of a matchup. And I watched Boise State where they shut down Genty because they just stacked the box and they stacked the box. And I said, man, that might happen to Scadaboo also. What I wasn't aware of is that it didn't matter. I mean, he got his anyway. Not only did he get 143 yards rushing on 30 carries, but he also had a tremendous amount of receiving yards.
He was incredibly impressive. And
He
I would say
contributed in so many ways. It was incredible.
I'd say the two guys who helped themselves the most coming out of this game for the draft is Scadaboo and Matthew Golden, who's the wide receiver for Texas.
Yeah.
Those two guys way up the draft boards. Let's talk about the Rose Bowl. This is the one everyone wanted. Ohio State ends up winning this game by 3 touchdowns over Oregon, built up a humongous 34-0 lead. Everyone was just stunned. I was sitting there watching this. I couldn't even believe it with my girlfriend who's an Ohio State fan. And she was, of course, jumping around the living room like crazy, so happy. But I knew Oregon would come out as halftime and find a way to get this thing going, and they did. And Dylan Gabriel really responded, and I felt like it was a real gutsy effort in the second half, but Ohio State was just the better team. Will Howard played a game I didn't think he could play, which is why I picked Oregon in the first place. I didn't think Will could outduel Dylan Gabriel, but he did. What were your thoughts about this passing matchup?
I mean, I picked Oregon in this game, but I knew that Ohio State had the superior roster. In fact, Ohio State has the best roster in college football and one of the better ones I've ever seen assembled. And they're calling it the NIL roster because all these players got brought in and got paid. Plus, almost their whole defense is seniors, and they have all these 5-star All-Americans. So it shouldn't be surprising that they're blowing people out and playing like this. What was surprising throughout the year was they had this roster and they didn't always play like this. That was the surprise. But they're the best team in college football when they play together, period. There's no other team that can do what they can do.
I mean, you look at these weapons, they're all NFL. Travion Henderson and Judkins. I mean, 1-2 punch like you've never seen in college football.
They have their backup running back is going to be a first-round draft pick.
Yeah. And then you got this Jeremiah Smith, who's 18 years old. I mean, have you ever seen a more dominant performance in a big game like that before by a freshman? He was unbelievable.
Herb Street's saying he's the best player in college football.
He may be.
I think he might be. I'm not sure. But they have 3 NFL wide receivers, 2 NFL running backs. Their offensive line is NFL all over the place. Their left tackle is hurt. So they have their left guard who's a 5-star NFL.
And you haven't even mentioned the defense.
Moved to left tackle.
NFL players on the defense.
And then defense, they have the best defensive player in the country, Caleb Downs.
Mm-hmm.
He's an absolute monster. They let him roam. He's like Troy Polamalu, basically. Mm-hmm. He's just roaming out there. He'll come up and run support. He can cover anybody, and he's a hard hitter. It's crazy. He's so good. So Caleb Downs is unbelievable. They have great corners. They have great depth everywhere. They have 5 stars everywhere. And they just haven't played that well together for some reason. And part of the reason for that is Will Howard hasn't had a great season. But when he plays well and he can sort of be a puppeteer with all these pieces, man, they're impossible to stop, like literally impossible.
And you look at this tandem they have at running back, and then you look at the 3 receivers. You talk about Smith, Egbuka, and then Tate. Those are your 3 NFL receivers. They're all incredible. And then I look over at the Oregon rushing numbers, and they've got 14 yards and 4 yards. Those are the 2 leading rushers. You just can't get it done when you're getting 18 yards rushing.
No, listen to this. The amount, do you know what their total rushing was?
What?
Ohio State had 181 total, and Oregon had -23.
Wow.
negative 23. That's
Yep.
what Ohio State's defense did.
They literally could not get the ball going on the ground.
They had to throw it. There was no chance of running it.
Now, I will say this kid, Holden's really good for Oregon, and he's going to be a pro as well.
Oh, there's
Nice
great
game.
players. It's just
Yeah.
they couldn't handle how good Ohio State was when they were clicking and playing well together.
Right. So did this say more about Oregon? Did it say more about Ohio State? Was this the case of what we were talking about earlier, where Oregon had a week off and were rusty in the first half?
Mm.
Was it just a talent mismatch? What was this?
It was a talent mismatch. Ohio State would have beaten anybody they played that day, period.
Yeah, I think that's right.
They're the best assembly of players in college football, and when they play well together, they're unbeatable. And
Will
you just
Howard
don't know if they're going to play well or not. If they played Oregon again and they didn't play as well, that would have been a good game. But
Will Howard had never played that well before. That's why
Will Howard played unbelievably well.
Yeah, so
not well enough to get up on the celebration podium, but.
So you think that Ohio State pretty much stamped their name on these playoffs? I mean, they announced themselves to the country.
There's no reason to believe that they won't play like that again and win the whole thing, but we've seen a full season where they didn't always play like that. So when they're kind of out of sync, they're not that impressive. Somehow the quality of each of those pieces doesn't fit as well together. But when Will Howard is sort of the symphony conductor, they have an all-star group of musicians, so to speak. It's
that's right.
It's unbeatable music. So
this was incredibly impressive to watch. I had not seen a team as good as Oregon get dismantled like this in a long time. It was crazy.
Yeah, that's the thing that's hard to remember is when you're watching this happen. Oregon was the best team in the country all year, and undefeated.
And by the way, Dan Lanning's a really good coach. So they have a really good staff, really
great
good player,
quarterback, great line, offensive line healthy, great. The only thing I did say was I was worried that Ohio State was going to be able to throw on them, and they sure did.
Yeah,
they sure did. Right. They had 500 yards of total offense versus
this was really great game
for Oregon.
Really great game to watch, and incredibly surprising to see how easily Ohio State built up that lead.
Yeah.
And Oregon, I will give them credit. They really gutted it out. And they tried to come back and cut the lead. They fought.
Yeah.
But just too much of a deficit to come back.
It was too much. Yeah.
So next game, we had to wait an entire day for this one because there was a terrorist attack in New Orleans. I do want to just express our condolences to those who were killed and those who have been injured. They had to delay it and get ready for this game, and they did, which happened last night. And essentially both defenses were completely dominant throughout this game. It was really kind of painful to watch these offenses try to operate. Fighting Irish used 2 turnovers and a 98-yard kickoff return to seal the victory. And we're smothering is kind of an understatement to say the kind of defense Notre Dame played in this game. What were your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I second your condolences. We feel terrible for what happened, and it's so sad. And we feel really bad for the families who have to endure that now. But we're certainly understanding of the delay of the game. They had to do some really fast investigating to see what we were dealing with. But it was a very upsetting event. The more you learn, the more disturbing it was. So I'm glad that we got to move past that and let our way of life win out and our norms continue with the heavy hearts. But we definitely got a good game out of it. They did a good job of in a classy way, trying to make sure that we moved forward with the game and honored the people who had fallen. But as far as domination goes, I mean, Notre Dame was so dominant on defense. They had 9 tackles for loss, and Georgia had 1. There were they had a kickoff return for a touchdown and 4 sacks and 2 fumble recoveries. Texas. Notre Dame. So Notre Dame was just dominant on special teams, on defense, and their offense played well. It played about as well as you can do against the Georgia defense that the whole defensive line is probably NFL. And their offense sputtered, but their defense was excellent. So Notre Dame, neither team did great on offense, but Notre Dame was good in that it did not give the
I was
ball
going to
over.
say Riley Leonard only had 90 yards passing, so he didn't
Yeah.
do very much. He did have one touchdown pass, but he also had a lot of yards on the ground. But I would say Notre Dame's offense really was generally pretty ineffective, and so was Georgia's.
It was.
This
It
was a
was.
tale of defenses.
It was Georgia was able to throw the ball. They had 234 yards passing versus 90, and Notre Dame was able to run the ball. So it was a clash of styles. And I'm always surprised this year anytime Georgia didn't have a good running year, game, because they just weren't the same Georgia with a stable of running backs and just pounding it down your throat. They had 62 yards rushing, and Notre Dame had 154. So
And they weren't
Notre
really
Dame.
the same passing game we're used to either from Georgia. I'd say both sides of their offense were not really what we're used to seeing.
Well, I'm not used to them throwing it all that much. I know they've had, different star wide receivers in the past, but I don't think of Georgia as a throwing team. I think of them as a running team who can throw off play action and stuff like that. But if you told me Georgia was going to get 62 yards rushing for the game, I would tell you they're not going to win then. And that's exactly what happened. But
Right.
9 tackles for a loss for Notre Dame was impressive. On fourth down, Georgia was 0 for 3. So, it just – and the kicking game was huge. Notre Dame hit 3 of 3 field goals and 2 of 2 extra points. And Georgia only hit 1 field goal and 1 extra point. So that was kind of the difference in some of the scoring there was the kicking game and the grinding it on the ground and incredible defense.
You notice Etienne only had 11 carries, which is really unusual because he had been
it's not
carrying
enough.
Georgia for about 2 or 3 weeks. He had been much of their offense, and 11 carries, just very ineffective. And Notre Dame very much to be the reason for that. I mean, they just were absolutely dominant on the line of scrimmage.
Yeah. To start the second half with a kickoff return for a touchdown was a backbreaker.
It was.
Yeah.
Georgia's offensive line also did not look like an offensive line I'm used to by them. It was really.
They got whipped.
Yeah. It was like
they had like 45 pounds per man more than Notre Dame, but Notre Dame's guys were powerful and fast, and so they were really difficult. Georgia was doing everything they could not to hold the Notre Dame guys, so they would get run by and they would stick their arm out and hold for a minute and then have to let go because they didn't want to get the call. And, the Georgia quarterback Stockton was getting just stampeded
right
by smaller, faster, strong Notre Dame players.
So some of the games like the Texas-Arizona State game, that was very much an offensive game. This was very much a defensive game. It was a defensive struggle from beginning to end. 2 great defenses, 2 offenses that were really struggling to even move the ball and get first downs. And in the end, Notre Dame's special teams was the edge here.
If you take the touchdown off the board for the opening second half kickoff return for touchdown, that puts you at 16-10. They hit 3 field goals and Georgia hit 1. That's kind of the difference in the game was that Notre Dame was able to get turnovers that turned into points and field goals, and Georgia didn't get any turnovers. Right. So Notre Dame protected the ball, and they did a good job of keeping it close and all that other stuff.
That's right. It was a fun game to watch if you like defense. And I enjoyed it. It was 2 epic heavyweight teams going at it. I picked Notre Dame. I believe you picked Georgia in this one. I felt like Georgia had subpar quarterback play coming into this and really throughout much of the season. And I felt like this backup guy, Stockton, although he looked okay in his one half of play, I felt like this stage would be a little too big for him. I did not realize that they wouldn't be able to run the ball at all. I didn't realize that coming in, but I just felt like Notre Dame was going to get it done, and they did.
Riley Leonard did not do much. He ran the ball effectively, but he did not do much throwing. So that kind of was not unexpected for me. I felt like that was going to be the formula. But Georgia's offense was completely ineffective, and therefore I did not see this loss coming. But
Yep. And we'll see what happens going forward. So college football bowl games, let's talk about some of the other ones out there. There have been some really good ones the last 10 days. It started with Toledo, Pittsburgh going into a 6 overtime battle. It was an unbelievable game. Pittsburgh comes out on the short end of this one. This is one of those things where it gets into the OTs where you have to go for 2 only. Toledo was able to get it, and Pittsburgh was not. There was a lot of yards in this game and a lot of offense. So if you enjoyed it, it was a lot of fun for you. Any thoughts on this one?
Pittsburgh had a nice season. I think they kind of sputtered down the stretch. Once the lights got a little bright and they started to be considered at the upper echelon of the ACC, they kind of caved in. I think they have a good program going. And I feel like Toledo had a nice season. So I'm just not sure if they played this again, what would happen. It'd probably be a completely different result.
Possibly. Although these teams seemed very evenly matched in this game. I was watching the highlights, and I think that they selected well. Sometimes the bowl committees select well, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's a real mismatch, but this seemed to be very much 2 teams that were equal. Pittsburgh is a nice program. They were in the ACC championship game in 2023 and seem to have a nice thing going on there. So we'll see. I think they'll be back.
Yeah, they had a good season. It wasn't great. It started great and kind of sputtered, but I like their program. Their coach is really good.
Yep, agreed. Next one we got was Navy taking on Oklahoma. Nobody really was fully sure what was going to happen in this game. Navy, of course, coming off the big win against Army in the Army-Navy game, and also had a fantastic season, as did Army. And they pulled off a stunning upset, 21-20 against Oklahoma. Ran up a lot of yards, especially on the ground. What were your thoughts about this Armed Forces Bowl?
Well, it was interesting. Navy won some statistical categories, and Oklahoma won some other ones dramatically. So it was a very interesting game. If you look at Horvath was 7 for 12, 92 yards passing, and he had no touchdowns, no interceptions, but he added 18 carries for 155 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he's basically a running back under center, and they got 226 yards rushing. Rushing, and Oklahoma had 158. So that was a dominating performance of Navy running the ball. However, oddly enough, Oklahoma had 27 first downs and Navy had 11.
That's interesting.
So
able to pull the game out.
Right.
You know what's funny is Navy and Army run the ball so much, and yet, and you know it's coming, and they still do it on you. It's pretty incredible.
Navy plays pretty good defense, surprisingly. They're going to be undersized but quick and hard workers. They had 4 sacks and a fumble recovery, so clearly they were putting some pressure on Oklahoma.
Yeah, good
and
ball
they pulled
game.
it out. Yeah, good ball game.
Yeah,
Oklahoma was favored by 2.5, and they lost by 1, so that's pretty tight.
Do you think Oklahoma's going to be making a coaching change, or you think they're going to try to give them another year?
I don't know about that one.
They had a real up and down year. They beat some teams they shouldn't have. They lost to some teams they shouldn't have.
6 and 7 is not terrible. You make a bowl game. I don't think that's fire material. I don't think Oklahoma is thought of as a powerhouse yet. So
if they go 5 and 7 next year, though, it's probably in trouble.
Maybe they might feel like they gave him enough time. Venables, they paid him a lot of money, so I think his buyout is kind of ugly. So Venables, I think they want it to work.
Yeah,
they want it to work, and they went to a bowl game, extra weeks of practice. So
the next game was the Birmingham Bowl. This was Georgia Tech and Vanderbilt, 2 of the better academic and lower end football schools in their conferences. Vanderbilt had a fantastic year, probably their best football year in about 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Georgia Tech actually had a really nice start to the year and kind of fizzled out a little bit like Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
Your thoughts about this game? 35-27, Vanderbilt gets another win.
It was pretty exciting. Pretty exciting. They were Vanderbilt was solid this year. Diego, their quarterback, definitely had some brilliant plays. Was real solid, and Georgia Tech had some real nice games this year. So this was a great matchup, actually. Very solid bowl game.
Mm-hmm. No question. I really enjoyed this game. Like you said, Vanderbilt kind of overachieved, and they were really kind of fun to watch. I know a lot of the country was rooting for them, especially when they had a couple of their big upsets this year. And Georgia Tech, same thing. They had a couple of big upsets. They started the year with the upset over Florida State,
Mm-hmm.
which at the time we thought was a monumental upset. We didn't realize Florida State was down this year, but really fun to see these two teams that have always been the basement of their leagues kind of rising a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm really wondering if these two teams can, with good coaching and good recruiting, kind of rise a little bit in their conferences permanently. I guess we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Vanderbilt's always been the team that everyone circles as the automatic win in the SEC. So, yeah, fun game to watch. Lots of good offense. And
These are the kind of bowls that I want to make sure we have continue forward.
I agree.
You know,
Yep, totally agree. It
good
was
for
really
programs.
solid.
It's a good reward for teams that fought real hard this year and had good years. Reward the seniors, the alumni, the teams make money and they get good recruiting out of it. Good practice time. 3 extra weeks of practice time. There's nothing but positives here.
No question. Next game was Arkansas, Texas Tech, two teams that have a lot of big offense this year. This was the Liberty Bowl. Arkansas comes out on top, another SEC win against Texas Tech, 39-26, rolled up a lot of offense. Any thoughts on this one?
A lot of scoring. Arkansas had a really good season for the most part. They were real tough. They had some tough games and just kind of took it to Texas Tech, but very high scoring game. And
this is another case where I think you take a quality SEC team, even if they're in the bottom half of the league, and they're going to almost always beat a Texas Tech. You know what I mean? It's just there's a disparity between the top two leagues and everybody else.
Yeah.
So you take Arkansas, even if they finish 12th in the SEC, they're going to beat almost everybody else except for one of the playoff teams. That's just the way I look at it. Yeah. So, and we saw that over and over and over in these playoff games. Even in the playoff itself, these teams that are not used to playing a Big Ten or SEC program. So, So yeah, good game, solid game by Arkansas. They were a tough out the entire year, so not surprising to me at all. Syracuse comes out on top. This was the battle of two really good quarterbacks, both of whom are going to be NFL players one day. Syracuse comes out with 52 against Washington State's 35 in the Holiday Bowl. Any thoughts on this one?
Kyle McCord was a star.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
He had 24 of 34, 453 yards, 5 touchdowns, no picks, 94.3 QBR. Unbelievable.
Yep. And we talked about what Ohio State would be like if he had stayed there.
Yeah.
We've been really interested.
They could use him.
Yeah,
But with Will Howard playing like he is, I don't think you really need to make too many changes. But
that's true.
But they ran the ball well. LaQuint Allen had 120 yards and 2 touchdowns rushing, 45 yards and a touchdown receiving. So he played out of his mind. And Aronde Gadsden, the third, I believe it is, the son of the Miami Dolphin player that I used to watch, he had 74 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns.
This is another one of those bowls that you would like to keep. And the reason you would is because these two teams had really good seasons,
Yeah.
And you're finding a way to reward the seniors on these two teams that had really great seasons and didn't quite make it.
Right.
Yeah. So really solid game there. It was really fun to watch McCord all year. Going to be fun to watch him next year as well. Next one is USC pulls off a little bit of an upset against Texas A&M. Everyone had been picking A&M in this game in the Las Vegas Bowl. USC comes up strong and wins 35-31 against this SEC squad. What were your thoughts?
Well, USC was down 17 points and had a big comeback. So that was pretty cool to watch that in the third quarter. Elko said they weren't good enough against the pass, and so that their secondary kind of let them down a little bit. And they pretty much A&M struggled in zone coverage and weren't able to really hang with USC once they got rolling. So, and they kind of relied on Marcel Reed, who's a mobile quarterback, but not really known for his throwing. They asked him to throw the ball 42 times. I'd say that's a recipe for disaster. They held their own, but I would not structure the game plan that way. He had 42 throws, 26 of 42, 292 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks. He did have 9 rushes for 46 yards and a touchdown. He's a very mobile quarterback. They made a switch out halfway through the year and went to the more mobile guy who's not as good a thrower. And you know, they played to his strength the best they could, but they ended up having him throw the ball way too much, and therefore they were susceptible. But it was a really good game. Real good
It was
game.
a really good game. And these are two of the teams that are having their quarterbacks transfer on them, like a lot of teams are. So it'll be interesting to see going into next year who these guys get as their signal callers. So, of course, that's the new reality in the transfer portal is that you can only hold on to guys sometimes for only 1 year. So we'll see what happens there. Next one, we got UConn pulls off a stunning upset against North Carolina. This was after Mac Brown's last regular season game. UConn being one of the worst programs in college football the last 10 years, but had a little bit better season this year, made it to a bowl, and took out North Carolina, of course, who just got a new coach, Bill Belichick. What was interesting about this game was actually played in Fenway Park, which is a baseball stadium. So any thoughts on this one?
It was kind of wild the way they set it up. Not much. I think Carolina had a very disappointing season. To have Mac Brown leave the way he did, I would say that they would be a program in the downtrend, except for it was pretty smart. They went out and got Belichick, create a splash, and he's been doing an amazing job already in the transfer portal. So I would say this season was a flush down the toilet season, but I don't think it's an extension going forward how it's going to look. I think they're remaking the program so quickly into something new that it'll be fine. They had a bad year.
Yeah.
And they had Mac Brown leave with his
and
tail between his legs.
And they had 12 starters who refused to play in this game because some of them some are transferring and some are trying to prepare for the NFL draft. So I'm not sure you can take very much from this when you have half your starters not playing, and
everyone wants to just start over with the new regime.
You don't have a lot of motivation. Your coach was essentially fired, although he says it was mutual, but he essentially was fired. And
there's no way he mutually left and didn't coach the bowl game.
Yeah, agreed. So I'm not sure you can take very much from this. Good for UConn, though. It's a big win for them.
Yeah, it's good for their program, good for their alumni. Makes their team something to be happy about going into next year
and build on. Yeah, no doubt about it. Next game was really an epic game. We talked about this with Luke a little bit. Iowa State, his team wins 42-41. They weren't sure if Cam Ward was going to play at all. He ends up playing the whole first half, although the original plan was to play just the first quarter. This was the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Really, really exciting. I loved watching this game. There was so much offense. It was incredible. What were your thoughts on this one, your takeaway? And I know we've beaten it up a little bit, but, Cam's decision not to play second half.
Well, first and foremost, no Restrepo for Miami. He sat out. Ward playing a half, I'm fine with. We've already covered that. I think he did not quit on his team. That's mischaracterization. He was supposed to play a quarter. He played a half. He got the record, and that's spectacular. Good for him. I think Miami ran the ball pretty effectively, but they had 308 yards of rushing. which is outstanding. But it was a very high-scoring game. There were 59 points at halftime already scored.
Right.
And Iowa State came back all year, and they did it again. So, of course, people are going to point to that Cam Ward was out. That's why the comeback happened. I don't think so. I think Iowa State was known for comebacks this year. And
And
this
they have a
was,
really solid squad. You know, they really
yeah, and
do.
this was the most fun bowl to watch in terms of all the branding and the Pop-Tart logo and the Pop-Tart mascot. And then he went in the toaster, and then out came Rocco Beck's favorite Pop-Tart, which is cinnamon roll Pop-Tart. And it was just really fun, all the branding that they attached to this bowl now. I think they do the best job of all of them
I
in
agree.
terms of making it fun to watch and getting the kids involved. And
It was a lot of fun.
the
I will say,
mascot.
the reason this game was so fun to watch is because you had two really good teams. These two teams were lined up for the 12-team playoff almost the entire season, and both faded at the end. But
Yeah.
you had essentially teams that got very close to making it to the 12-team playoff playing each other, which I thought was really cool. I do have to wonder, though, if Cam Ward had played the second half, if Miami would have come out on top or not.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I don't think this game, it really didn't matter too much who won. I think they were really just putting on a spectacle.
Yeah.
And Cam Ward got his record, and Miami was favored by 5.5, but I think that was counting on Ward to play the whole game. But I just think this was the best bowl in terms of the organizers of the bowl did such a good job, and it was fun. You saw the Pop-Tart mocking the ref, and it was just funny. Like it was cool. The way that at the end where he went down in the toaster.
Yeah.
It's fun. Like
It was a great game. It was a great game. I really
it was a
enjoyed it.
great game, and it had a lot of cool stuff around it that it would just be a lot of fun to be at that game if you're an
Right.
alumnus.
No
You know?
doubt. No doubt about it. Good for Iowa State
Mm-hmm.
getting it done. So next game was very disappointing for us. East Carolina takes out NC State in the Military Bowl. We had a couple players on the NC State team that did not want to play because they're going into the transfer portal or they're graduating. So NC State was not at full measure. Even so, they really should never lose to East Carolina and ended up finding a way to do so in this game. What were your thoughts?
I mean, I have a lot of friends who support the program, go to all the games, etc. And there was a tremendous amount of disgust. They were incredibly frustrated and embarrassed at losing to East Carolina. I think that it directly led to them letting the offense coordinator, Robert Anai, go. They said enough of that. We're just not getting it done
Which we
offensively.
had been calling that for a while or a couple of years.
It was a final straw, so to speak. It was embarrassing the way the fight happened at the end of the game, where all those players are getting ejected. I think NC State's a much classier program than that, but it was kind of a debacle, to be honest with you. It's kind of a debacle.
Almost, we have to go back to the drawing board kind of game going into next year. That's what it felt
Yeah, I
like.
think they just need to chalk that season up to not a great season.
Yeah, it just was not good. They and UNC both have a lot to build for,
I mean, NC State was 6-7,
Yeah.
It's
They
not
have a lot
good.
to build for. Yeah. And this
They're
is
used
a
to
season,
they're used to 10-3.
this is a season they started 18 in the preseason poll. So, I
Yeah.
mean, there was a lot of
Yeah,
hopes they were in the big
they had
game.
high expectations, and this was one of the many ACC losses that happened that you scratch your head. What did the ACC have? One win, I think.
2-11.
2-11.
Really
Yeah.
incredible.
It was bad.
Really bad.
I think they said it was the worst the conference has ever done.
That's right.
In
So
the
next
postseason.
game is 34-14 BYU playing Colorado. I think if this had been a regular season game and both teams had been taking it seriously, this would have been a very competitive game. I think Colorado likely would have come out on top barely, but BYU has a pretty good squad. This was the Alamo Bowl. Colorado promised they would play their big three, and they did in the first half and did not play them in the second half. and BYU kind of picked it up in the second half and won this one going away. Anything you can take from this one? Colorado, you tried to put on a show, but it's really kind of sad. I mean, I felt sad.
BYU was the better team. I mean, BYU scored in every quarter. They had a punt return for a touchdown, so they had special teams dominance. They had 4 sacks and 2 INTs, interceptions. So, they just they had 100. Listen to this: rushing yards, BYU 180, Colorado 2.
Yeah, it's not good.
I mean, that's
I felt a little sad in this game because I was watching it and thinking to myself, that's the last time you're going to see Shador. That's the last time you're going to see Hunter. It's the last time you're going to see Shiloh. These 3
until
guys
Sundays.
walk off the field. I know. I'm just saying they walk off the field with
You're
their
gonna see them on Sundays.
college careers ending, and just kind of a
Yeah.
whimper. I just felt like they would have given a little bit better effort. I don't know.
I think BYU is sneaky good. I mean, they were 11-2,
Mhm.
and they had Ratzliff who played very efficiently for the most
Yeah.
part. He did have some picks, but
And
they were
Colorado
kind of
was not all in
Michigan.
this game. I mean, that was pretty clear. You could
Yeah,
feel it.
no, and
They
I
were
think
not all in.
BYU was just outside the playoff.
Right.
They were one of those top 3 or 4 teams just out. So
Mhm. That's right.
yeah.
Yep. Well, we'll see. Like you said, those 3 guys will be playing on Sunday, and BYU was clearly the better team that day. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So next game, Missouri beats Iowa 27-24 in the Music City Bowl in Nashville. This is a really solid game between 2 teams that had playoff aspirations early in the season and had pretty solid seasons, both of them. Missouri has a really solid quarterback that had been talked about as a first-round talent. What are your thoughts on this one?
I don't know. I was happy for Missouri. I think they kind of started out the year looking like a world beater, headed for the playoff, and then they just kind of toppled from grace, and then they end strong with a win. So I was happy for them.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I
Yeah.
think Missouri's the better team as well, and I think that they had a better season and fell a little bit short of their original idea that they were going to go to the 12-team playoff, but for the most part, finished this off on a pretty good note. So we'll see. I think Missouri's a solid program. They're going to continue building in the SEC. I like what they've got going on. They've got some good coaching as well. This was a good, solid game. I mean, you could tell it's good. 2 good head coaches kind of going at it, X's and O's, and they both play pretty solid defense. So pretty enjoyable to watch. All right, next one. It was a big one. This nobody saw coming. Everyone assumed that Jalen Milroe in his last game in college would roll it up on Michigan, who had struggled to score all year. This is the ReliaQuest Bowl. Instead, Michigan put on one of the best performances the entire season of any team and just completely shut down and frustrated Milroe from beginning to end and won this game 19-13 in a real low-scoring affair. So what were your thoughts on this one?
Michigan's D came through huge. They were the difference maker here. They had 5 sacks, an interception, and 2 fumble recoveries. Those were just pivotal plays. Michigan dominated running the ball 115-68 to Alabama. I'm not used to Alabama teams running it for 68 yards.
Not just that, but didn't it feel like Alabama was so pass reliant this year?
Yeah.
Just generally, and it's just too much.
I felt like DeBoer brings a lot of passing and quarterback focus, and it just didn't work well with Milroe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I
maybe.
mean, they have amazing wide receivers. They have probably the second best young wide receiver in the country.
Now, you have to give Michigan some credit on how they finished this year
Lots
because
of
they
credit.
struggled a lot the first half of the year. They were really pretty bad, actually.
Michigan got 16 points off turnovers.
And then they go ahead and finish up the year by beating Ohio State and then beating Alabama. I mean, that's a pretty nice way to finish. And you have to think with some competent quarterback play next year, they're going to be right back in it, right?
Yeah.
You have to think. And then what was funny about Alabama is Milroe declares for the NFL draft after the game, and DeBoer fired 2 of his assistants, both on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
So he's already making changes, even though he's only been there a season.
I think he knows the alumni are not going to put up with this. We're a throwing team now and not be able to throw. Like, if you're going to get rid of the running, and you're not going to have Derrick Henry back there, you're going to need to be very good at throwing the ball to convince your alumni that you're on the right track. So, changes are needed. You either need to go more towards running the ball again, or you need to make sure that you have a high-flying offense.
When's the last time you remember Alabama going 8-4? That's a pretty pedestrian record for.
In the SEC, that's not terrible, but
one
the
of the
way they lost, where they were not running the ball well. I'm used to Alabama having 350-pound linemen that could knock your house over.
Yeah. Well, this was a very impressive way for Michigan to finish the year, the last couple games, and just kind of a whimper for Alabama. I don't know where they go from here. DeBoer's got some work to do to put his stamp on the program that seems like it has atrophied a little bit.
So, I think the program is caught between a throwing every down, high-flying offense and a grind team. I think DeBoer doesn't necessarily bring in great defensive talent recruiting-wise. So I think it remains to be seen. I think he can get there. I think he can do it over time, but I think he needs more time.
No, that's right. Agreed. We'll see both those teams as they go forward. Next
and
game
the SEC is the wrong place to be experimenting with things.
It's true. It was a really entertaining game. Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl. You were talking about the Pop-Tart Bowl and how much fun they had with their mascot. Well, this Tony the Tiger Bowl, he was everywhere. Tony the Tiger was in every frame they could get him into. And Louisville ends up winning this game 35-34. Washington actually scored very late and went for 2 points to try to win the game instead of try to take it to overtime. Which is, I think it's a smart decision when you're talking about a bowl game. You're talking about no real upside. Washington ends up failing to get the 2-pointer, and Louisville wins this game and was one of only 2 wins for the ACC in this bowl season. What were your thoughts about this one?
Louisville was missing 22 players for portal and opting out. So, I would have, if I'm Washington, I would have gone for overtime. But, it's the Louisville defense is what really came in huge. The Louisville defense is what got it done. 5 sacks and a pick 6.
Right.
That's pretty. That's
and
pretty.
The Washington QB, I'm not used to seeing them have so little experience. He was a freshman this year, and he's relatively short. He's a 5'10" freshman quarterback, and he kind of struggled in this game a little bit. Louisville really put a lot of pressure on him.
Yep.
So they, I don't know. I'm used to Washington having real experienced quarterbacks. So I thought it was a good game, though. We watched it, and there was a lot of offense, a lot of exciting plays in it.
But he did well, though. I mean, he was 26 of 32, 4 touchdowns and a pick.
Yeah. Yep.
So he definitely got points on the board.
Points on the board, but if you look at his completion percentage, it was like 55%. And
he was under a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Louisville's D got it done. So
he did. It was a good game. Good, solid game.
Washington had 0 sacks. I'm not used to Washington struggling like that.
Right. Next game was the Citrus Bowl. This was a game everyone assumed South Carolina, one of the hottest teams in the country, was going to roll it up on Illinois, although Illinois does have a pretty good quarterback. Illinois gets it done, 21-17. And I was listening to sports radio here in the Charlotte area. There's a lot of Gamecock fans, and there was a lot of really angry calls calling in. And these are guys that had been supporting Beamer all year, but said that they felt like the team was unprepared, that their game plan was really bad, and they couldn't complete a pass. And I don't know, it was really surprising to see South Carolina struggle the way they did, where they had been playing so well. Thoughts?
Yeah, this was a very interesting game to watch. First, just from the grandeur of it, the Cheez-It mascot was hilarious. They did all kinds of cool stuff with him. They kicked him through the uprights like he was a field goal. it was a fantastic bowl. Second, the game itself, they ended up having the two coaches having a lot of respect for each other and a real friendly exchange in the beginning, laughing. They were filming them laughing and yucking it up and shaking hands and all that. And then later in the game, they had a huge meltdown where they were yelling at each other. And the reason it happened was there was a controversial play where the Illinois coach, Brett Bielema, said basically the South Carolina kickoff return guy put his arms out like he was saying the ball was over his head, and then he caught it, and they had a huge return while all the Illinois guys let up. And Bielema thought that that it was a kind of dirty play, kind of dirty tactics. Although the refs later had said it's legal, you're allowed to do it as long as you don't do your hands over your head. It's more of a courtesy thing.
Right.
And Bielema's point was, hey, we're trying to take injuries out of the game. It kind of reminds me when quarterbacks pretend like they're going out of bounds and then fake and stay in,
or pretend like they're going to slide.
pretend like they're going to slide and keep going. It's sort of,
yeah.
It's an abuse of
Yes.
a thing. So I kind of feel like I get Bielema, but he went out and was checking on one of his players and stood up and did the same signal with his arms. And South Carolina coach went crazy. And so that was just interesting. It was interesting.
This was
but they had the Cheez-It mascot marry a couple and stuff. So with cue cards. So it was a cool game.
I will agree with you. There was a bunch of bowls this year that did a really nice job with the the product placement and the co-placement with some of the themes that they had. So I agree with that. And some of them made up for some of these bowls that were kind of stinkers. And this one was kind of a stinker from an offensive perspective. So, did you find it as surprising as I did about South Carolina and the fact that they were playing so well and didn't play so well in this game?
Yeah, but Illinois, Altmaier was great. I mean, 13 to 22, 174, a touchdown, a pick, 87.6 QBR. He had a nice year, Yeah. But the guy Josh McCray ran the ball effectively, 2 touchdowns, 114 yards. So offensively, Illinois really looked pretty good. And South Carolina, I think, got a little distracted with that play with their coaches clashing.
Well, I still think Shane Beamer's a great coach, and I think South Carolina on the rise in the SEC. I'll watch out for them next year. I think they're going to be really good. So next game was the Texas Bowl. LSU had a really up and down year. They even were people calling for Brian Kelly to be fired because they had such an inconsistent year, but they did get this one done, 44-31 against a good Baylor team. Any takeaways from this one?
LSU had an up and down season. They certainly had a lot of talent. They always have the best wide receivers. They may not have the best wide receivers, but their wide receivers are always at the top. So Baylor had a nice season, but some disappointments in there too. And this just had a lot of scoring. It was a very high scoring bowl.
That was my takeaway, is that both of these teams don't have the defenses that a lot of their peers do.
No.
But there was talent all over the field. On both sides of the ball, there were great receivers. They were going 3-4 wide sometimes. They just really opened up. They have nothing really to play for. So they were opening up their playbooks is what it felt like.
They're trying to put good film out there for their guys to get consideration for NFL.
Exactly right. It was a good game. A lot of fun to watch. A lot of offense. A lot of scoring.
A lot of fireworks.
Last bowl we're going to consider is the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl, which happened last night. It happened right after the Georgia-Notre Dame game. So we watched that game, and then we went right into this one. And a little anecdote, we spent 5 days down in Amelia Island, Florida at the Omni Resort. And every year we go, there's always a team that stays there. So last year was Notre Dame. The year before was Clemson. And this year was Duke. and we got to know a lot of the players and a lot of their families. We were sitting poolside with them. We were sitting in the hot tub with them. There was one time where I was sitting in a hot tub with 12 Duke players. So I got to know their backup quarterback and a bunch of their offensive linemen, some of their wide receivers, and I was talking to all of them, and it was really fun. In the gym, I saw a couple of them there, and actually I was talking to you one of the times about how I thought Ole Miss was going to blow Duke out, and I didn't realize one of the Duke guys was behind me, and he goes, hey now," and so I had to apologize to him, but I told him I had to tell the truth. So I kind of saw this coming, but it was really kind of fun to get to know the Duke players, and they just couldn't compete from the very opening whistle. Ole Miss Jackson Dart was just fantastic. He's huge. He's physical. He has a big arm. He can run the ball. He ran a lot better than I thought he could. And this was
He's a
really,
big guy.
really a blowout from the very beginning. And we talked about the disparity between SEC and Big Ten and all the others. And
It was on display there.
ACC going 2-11 in bowl games pretty much shows where that conference is right now. Any thoughts on this Gator Bowl?
We've enjoyed it in the past. I'm glad you got to go this year. I watched quite a bit of it. Ole Miss just looked like superior athletes. They were in that second tier of the SEC, I think, where they were very competitive, but they couldn't quite compete with the top guys. But no surprise, really.
Yeah, agreed. Just too much power on both sides of the ball. And all these games, when you really look into it, it comes down to line and scrimmage, especially when it's two big programs.
Yeah.
And when you have a team that has both better line of scrimmages against Duke, they just whipped them.
I think
Just
Ole Miss would have had a good game against like Miami or Clemson.
no question. No
You know,
question about
the
it.
second tier of the SEC is lines up with the top tier of the ACC.
No question.
You
No
go
question about
second
it.
tier versus second tier, and you have a blowout.
Right. So there were a lot of good bowl games. I'm really, really happy a lot of these games happened. It really made the holiday season a lot more enjoyable. Hopefully, all of you guys had a chance to see some of these games. They really were fun. So let's look at some of our college football memes from this year. So this was an interesting stat that every team who got into the college football playoff this year got $14 million in compensation for their conferences, except for one, and that is Notre Dame, who got to keep the entire $14 million for themselves. And so my question to you, Robbie, and we talked about this offline, is this just another one of the reasons, and there's probably 20 reasons why Notre Dame doesn't want to join the conference and wants to stay independent, wants to keep everything to themselves?
I think 14, that's a small amount of money compared to their TV deal that they love as well. I think until it's worth their while financially, they're not going to join a conference. I think there will be one day an advantage in joining a conference in terms of the national title, uh, the automatic bid and all that stuff. But I don't think this amount of money right here, 14 million, is substantial for them. It's a nice challenge that they keep all of it, but
Although the other 11 teams, you have to say, look at this and go, dang it, we have to share with everybody in our conference.
true. But if you're going to share in other bowl winnings as well, so you'll get a lot of that back.
Mm-hmm.
So you get 4 instead of 14, but then you get 2 million from Clemson.
I've been arguing for a while now for Notre Dame to join a conference and to just stop the charade, because we're moving into this new era of NIL, transfer portal, and 12-team playoff. And I really feel it's important that teams align with a conference so that we know where everybody stands. But I just think the more we see these types of pieces of evidence, I think Notre Dame has less and less reason to join a conference. It's
through hard work they've built this brand. So it's a worldwide brand. They should get rewarded for it on some levels. I think we've worked out a pretty good deal with the ACC where they get to enjoy all the spoils of a conference without any of the downside. The ACC is a terrible example of how to handle the long-term TV contracts. So I don't think we're in a position really to argue that we provide them the best possible TV contract that we could do. So until the ACC gets itself straight, I don't even think there's an argument.
This is going to be interesting to watch because I really think there's going to be continued pressure for them to eventually join a conference, but we'll have to watch it. This next one, Cam Scotabo went off against Texas. And you can see what his overall stats were. 30
Yep.
carries, 143 yards, 2 touchdowns, 99 receiving yards, 42 passing yards. You mentioned that touchdown pass he had, a passing touchdown, and a 2-point conversion. Like there's almost nothing else he could have done to try to win this game. So have you ever seen a performance like this in a bowl game? I mean, it's pretty
I
incredible.
have, but very few. I mean, Vince Young and things like that. But watching him throughout this year, the numbers he was putting up, he was just awesome. And even that throw that I kind of criticized how underthrown it was, that wasn't even supposed to be where he put the ball to that guy. He was supposed to throw it in the flat on a short pass.
Right.
But he said he saw single coverage and he knew his guy was the better athlete. And he said he's going to lay it out where only his guy could catch it. And that's what he did. And so it wasn't as bad of a throw as it looked like.
Well, but Rob, the one thing you're not pointing out is that this was against Texas, the team you think has the best defense in the country.
I know.
So you put these kind of numbers up.
They weren't expecting it. They were doing all kinds of stuff. Arizona State was playing desperate and with guts, and they were like
like if he had these numbers against like Ohio University or something, that's one thing. But this is Texas.
He's a wrecking ball. The amount of after contact yardage is impressive, and his team believes in him. They give him the ball a lot in a lot of different ways, and he's an animal. I mean, he's throwing up on the sidelines,
right.
and goes back in shortly thereafter.
What was the rumor that he'd been drinking or something?
Some people online were arguing that he had been drinking the night before. That's why he was throwing up, and he debunked that. He got really mad, and I believe him. He said he chugged way too much water, and he said he felt it sloshing around on a couple of plays, and when he came off, he just threw up, and then from there he was fine. So
really
I believe him. If he was hungover, he wouldn't have recovered like that. I
he loves
absolutely
football
believe
too much too. I don't think he would do that the day before.
Oh, he eats, breathes, and sleeps football. The night before the greatest game, the biggest game of his life, he's not going to go out drinking.
I agree
Not
with
this guy.
I agree with
So
that.
I don't believe that. I mean, I'm
Do you
not going to
think
say
this,
it's impossible, but I really don't believe it.
we talked a lot about him with Luke and others this season, but do you think that the rest of America, there were some people that never heard of him. Do you think this was his coming out party?
Absolutely. I saw it all over the place. I mean, I heard it on radio, people saying, I haven't seen him much this year, but oh my God, this guy. Yeah, it was everywhere. People were reacting to him, and it was cool to see him introduced like that to the country because a lot of people really didn't know more than just they had heard his name maybe a little
It was
bit.
like his debut,
It was his debut, yeah. And
So
then there's
next
other
one,
scouts saying, I don't care what he runs in the combine,
right?
that his 40 time is going to be irrelevant because what he can do on a football field is transfers to the NFL. And I think that's right. I think a lot of scouts are going to, if he runs a 4.7 40, I don't think people are going to blink. I think they're going to line up to get him in the second or third round. And I'd say late first round. I could build my offense around him.
Man, I would love
He's not the best blocker. I think he could improve in his blocking game, but he can hurt you in so many ways. He's got real good hands, and he's a bowling ball.
I would love for any of my teams to take him. He's a football player. That's what you and I
He's a
talk
football
about.
player, and when you think about these guys that they're talking about, should we play him? Should we rest him? This is not a guy you're going to rest or even think about pulling out. He's going to play the whole game. Whether if you're Saquon Barkley, you want to play, but you're maybe not. This guy, I think, would demand to play every game, no matter what.
So this next one is all top 4 seeds have been eliminated from the CFP. These are all the teams that had buys. We've mentioned this before in the program. Do you think we'll ever see this again? Is this just a freak situation because they didn't reseed and they'll reseed in the future? Is that what
I
it
think
is?
that some teams in the future are going to have rust from sitting, but I think generally speaking, the worst teams lost overall. Especially with Ohio State playing the way they did. They're the better team when they play like that. So every team lost that was supposed to lose.
And Georgia with a backup quarterback, which hurts. They just couldn't
Georgia
get
with a
anything there.
backup quarterback, and they were ineffective running the ball. Their offensive line got whipped by a smaller, faster defensive line. It just wasn't their night, you know?
Right. That's right.
I know there was a big controversy of
So
Kirby Smart screaming that the Notre Dame team went on to punt and then ran their whole team off and ran the offense on. And the defense ran on for Georgia. It was 4th and 2. And the defense was discombobulated and jumped off sides.
Right.
And gave Notre Dame the first down. And Kirby Smart was mad because he said that he believed that in the SEC that's not allowed.
Right.
And he was wrong. So
on top of the top 4 seeds all being out, the top 5 conference winners, conference champions who won their championship games also are gone. That includes Clemson. So this seems almost even weirder that you have 5 conference champions and none of them make it to the Final Four. But does that seem odd to you?
Yes, I mean, a little, but not dramatically so. If you look in each case, several of these conferences are weaker. And then Oregon ran into Ohio State. They'd still be playing if they didn't play Ohio State playing its best football. And then Georgia just couldn't do anything offensively.
Does this mean that the conference championship game doesn't mean anything and that really these teams really just focus on getting into the playoff? Or
no, I think definitely it means because you get on a big stage and it tells you, where you are. A lot of times it'll give you that automatic bid.
This could also just be a weird coincidence because in the future you could have Ohio State win the Big Ten and you could have, Clemson win the ACC and get into the Final Four. Certainly possible.
It was a weird coincidence.
Just weird, yeah. Very strange. So next one is 3 points given up by Michigan in the second half against Ohio State and Alabama combined. And this defensive coordinator you're looking at here apparently is now surfacing and going up the list of guys who's going to be considered for jobs. I mean, Michigan's playing some serious defense the last couple of weeks.
They had a great defense all year. They just were unable to have any kind of offense. And that's why they had the losses they did.
And this isn't against a scrub team out of the MAC. This is Ohio State and Alabama.
Yeah.
No points given up at 3. This is pretty incredible. Next one is around the same lines. You have Michigan started 2024 by beating Alabama in the national championship game and then ended it by beating Alabama in a bowl game. Beats them twice in the same year.
With completely different teams.
And look at that. One is January 1st and one is December 31st. That's pretty well. Completely different team, quarterback, everything else, different coach.
So, yeah, Michigan might call this year pretty successful. I mean, they beat Ohio State and Alabama.
Yeah. I don't think it could be a failure.
It's not a failure.
And they're holding him to 3 points?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they really turned things around. It's pretty surprising.
They definitely had some disappointing weeks, but
so this next one was really interesting. Notre Dame's the first team ever to beat AP-ranked opponents in 6 different months. So they beat an AP opponent in Texas A&M in August, then Louisville, Navy, Army, Indiana, and Georgia. So they beat 6 different AP top 25 teams in 6 different months. That's how long the season is, too, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of that stat?
They had a horrendous loss, recovered, and then you can see how good their leadership is.
And then they went 11-0 since.
Yeah. They did some real big soul searching.
Yeah, they did. And Riley Leonard came on, too. That really helped. So last one here is that there's a report that Ewers has been offered $6 million on the table to enter the transfer portal, stay one more year in college, and to forego the 2025 NFL draft. So this number was $4 million 2 weeks ago and has now raised to $6 million, which would all be guaranteed. So what are your thoughts about this and kind of this whole scenario with the NIL money just increasing, and luring some of these guys to not go to the NFL and just stay?
I mean, I kind of like, to be honest, I like when the kids stay in school. It helps. I'll tell you what it does. And the NCAA is actually talking right now about extending a 5th year of eligibility to all players. And
Mhm.
the reason that's good for the NFL is you attach more to the players as they arrive at the NFL. You feel like you know them more. So you're buying their jersey and you're excited about them. And so there's a big conversation about increasing the number of years you can stay, decreasing the roster levels numbers, and having them do stratification of talent. The lower schools are going to become um, breeding ground, or like the minor leagues for the big time schools who can pluck the best players out of the smaller programs. Um, so freshmen are all going to play. There's only a couple of players who don't make it on the field. So there's a whole lot of things being talked about at the college level of restructuring everything and having sort of like the minor leagues be the William and Marys and the Buffaloes and the smaller college teams, and then different stratifications where you get all the way up to the SEC at the top, and they're stealing everybody.
Mhm.
And there's even talk about um, having like the UEFA thing where if Michigan comes in and takes a running back from a San Diego State, they owe San Diego State money,
Mhm.
stuff like that.
Well,
So
I love the 5th year thing because I think these guys need to develop more, especially the
yeah,
quarterbacks. We've
me
talked
too.
about how when they go to the pros, they need to hold a clipboard for a year or two anyway. Why
Hmm.
wouldn't you want them to stay at a big program for another
Yeah,
year and develop more and become a
they
better
can make their
quarterback?
$1 to $2 million,
Make the money.
so they're
Yep.
secure. So if they get hurt, they're
And
not
then
upside down.
the NFL is
It
getting a better product, right? You're
increases
getting-
their chances of getting a degree. NFL is going to get not only a better product, a more polished player, but also a player that the fans recognize more
right.
instead of it being somebody nobody's ever heard of.
Whereas, like a situation last year, you had JJ McCarthy come out at 21 years old after 3 seasons, but only 1 year starting.
Yeah,
I mean, he's good, but he was a raw product, right?
but we don't
21
know
years
how
old.
good. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're just not
And
sure.
so a guy like that could maybe stay another year or two and really
But
round out.
think how nice it is to be able to have a Bo Nix who was in college 6 years,
Yeah. Or
came
Michael
out
Penix
and
Jr.
started right away, and everyone knows what you got, and everyone's
Michael
buying
Penix
Bo Nix
Jr. was
jerseys.
25 years old when he came out. He was ready to go, you know?
Yeah, and
So,
everyone's
yeah.
buying Bo Nix jerseys. It's
Mhm.
not shocking to have him as a rookie starting,
Mhm.
and his career gets started quickly. And what's the difference between that and sitting with a clipboard for a year or two? Now he
Mhm.
has his degree. He's built up a big fan following over those 6 years. Name recognition. Everyone knows who Bo Nix is now. So
Yeah.
I kind
It's
of like
true.
it.
I like it too. I like it too. All right. Well, the moment of truth has arrived for Rob and me. We're going to talk about the Final Four bracket. We're going to pick who we think is going to win the whole thing and who's going to win the two semifinal games. We've got Ohio State playing Texas. Of course, that game is on Friday night, and then Notre Dame playing Penn State on Thursday night. So we have a Thursday night and a Friday night game this week. And just to remind you, Rob and I both picked Oregon instead of Ohio State. We both picked Texas. I picked Notre Dame. Rob picked Georgia, and then we both picked Penn State. So that's what we originally had predicted. So Robbie, I'll let you go ahead. Tell me who's going to win these two semifinal games and who's going to win the whole thing.
I think Ohio State wins, and I think Notre Dame wins, and I think Ohio State wins the national title.
Okay. Um, I have the exact same thing. I have Ohio State winning probably quite easily against Texas. Texas seems very vulnerable the way they're playing. And I think the Notre Dame Penn State game is going to actually be a really good game. It may come down to a field goal or a touchdown. I think Penn State's playing really well right now. I just think Notre Dame's defense is a little too much. So give me Notre Dame to win that game. And then I think Ohio State, the way they're playing, the way their offensive weapons are coming to pass right now, just a little too much for this field. So I think we both choose.
I will say that Ohio State, when they play like they played this last week, the last 2 weeks actually, they are going to win the whole thing. There's a good chance they falter and don't play like that. So,
well, that's the question. They were inconsistent all year, as you remember. So
yeah,
can they?
That's why I've been kind of nauseous about picking them. That's why I went with Oregon, because Ohio State is the best team in the country when they want to be.
But my personal belief is that Oregon is the second best team in the country, and
I agree.
they're out of this bracket. So
and they slap them around. So
I don't see
Ohio
any
State
of these
has
teams.
the potential to embarrass all three of these teams.
I don't see any of these three teams being able to stop them right now, the way they're playing. So,
but if they falter, if they make mistakes, if Will Howard doesn't play very well, if their defense gives up inexplicable plays, and they start to finger point, and they don't come together, they're beatable. Like, if they don't play well, Texas is going to beat them, because I think Texas is a better team overall. But the collection of talent on Ohio State is so good that they should be able to beat everybody.
What's interesting is you had Oregon and Georgia in the final, but you did say at the time that if Ohio State got past Oregon, they would be able to take this down. So that was interesting. And then I had Oregon and Notre Dame in the final, and then I had Oregon winning it all. So it's going to be really interesting. Drop us a comment, guys, on who you think is going to win the whole thing now that we're down to 4. Be real interested in your comments.
I feel less confident about Notre Dame over Penn State than I do Ohio State over Texas. Although I think you'll be able to tell within one half if Ohio State is opening a can of whip ass. If they are, Texas can't handle it. But if Texas hangs with them, I think they win it.
Completely agree with you. So final thoughts about, as we wrap up bowl season, go into this Final Four, any final thoughts for the fans out there?
It's very exciting to see the blue bloods up in there. I like it. And they're different ones this year. Like, we haven't seen a few in a while, but this has been a great season, culminating in a pretty cool, awesome way to finish the year. I like it so far. That the playoff is pretty cool. Reseeding and all that, sure, we can make it better, but it's a pretty great way to finish off. The bowls have been interesting. I love the ones that have really cool marketing and mascots and stuff. And it's been a really good college year so far.
This has been an epic ride from beginning to end. I've been so excited since we kicked off the first game in August. And Rob, what a great ride with you, man, on the Sports Guys, and heading into our second year as a podcast. It's just been incredible. And really excited, guys, to talk to you in about 2 weeks. We'll have the winner on January 20th. So we'll get into that game as well. Coming up this coming week, we've got our weekend recap on Monday, and then we've got our NFL playoff preview next Thursday. That's going to be a real exciting episode. So definitely look for that one. And we'll look forward to your comments, and we'll look forward to any feedback you got for us on the episode.
Yeah, I am looking forward to comments on this one. I'd love to see what people think about the podcast always, but what they think we should have talked about, or how they feel about what these matchups are giving us. Do they think that this gave us some of the best matchups that we could have had? Has it been as exciting for them out there as it is for us? Maybe people are overseas and they're not getting to catch up with it as much. Believe us, it's been pretty cool. So I'm hoping that people will take a second and leave us a comment. I really appreciate it if you do. And we are certainly very excited to see how this all ends up, and put the first year that we've done this, that we've had the 12-team playoff in the books, and we build from it. So
much fun.
Yeah.
You guys, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and have a great weekend of sports, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for joining us.
Take care.
See you.